Hey everybody, Jeff here. Just Jeff, just me alone, as sometimes happens. I just finished spending, God, almost the entire day editing Home on the RNG episodes, and the thought occurred to me that maybe there would be some interest or some value in sharing, behind the scenes at the making of Home on the RNG. So, if that's something you might be interested, I'm going to talk about how we picked the games, how and when we record, how I edit. If any of that is interesting to you, then stick around, and if none of that is interesting to you, I will see you next time. Home on the RNG began long ago because I wanted to experience more JRPGs. I had only played like the big names, and I knew that my dear friend Russ had extensive experience. Russ and I were very good friends in college. Since then, we'd gone, sometimes years without contact. But Russ and I have always enjoyed each other's company. We've always liked each other very much. So, we stay in touch and we visit from time to time. But I realized I didn't have the discipline to just sit down and force myself to play a bunch of retro JRPGs for no reason. Turning my hobbies into projects has had a high success rate with me, and so that's what I did. And I approached Russ, who I knew has played almost every JRPG ever created, to do it with me. It would be a chance for us to spend more time together, which we definitely have. Russ and I see each other every 3 months minimum now. We communicate a lot more than we used to. We send TikTok videos back and forth almost every day. I don't think it strengthened our friendship, because our friendship was already pretty strong, but it improved its regularity. And of course, we started it as a video series on YouTube, where Russ or I would capture video game footage as we played, and then in between each section, personal history, combat system, whatever, would be a little clip of the game with the music to give you a feel for it. Eventually, Russ suggested we switch it over to being a podcast, and I actually loved that idea because it seemed like significantly less work, right? Not having to capture video footage was a game changer. Plus, I do kind of feel like it works better as a podcast than as a video series. The old videos, I think the first 30 still exist as videos. So you can still see those on YouTube if you wanted to. Now, you've heard us talk about the list many times throughout the history of the show. The list is the list of games we want to play. And Russ gives me such grief about the rules and structure that I have put into place for this. When it comes to the list, there were 2 rules that I implemented. One was we play the games in a series in order. The reason for that one is so that we can talk about the improvements that happen to a series over time. Because, we'll take Persona, for example. Russ and Rachel pressured me into starting with Persona 3 in the series. And normally I would play a series in order. Now, I'm glad they did in this case. They were very persistent. Because Persona 3 is great. But after playing Persona 3, it is actually harder for me to play Persona 1, 2, and 2 because they are downgrades in several quality of life and just, technological limitations. It's hard to go back to ramen after eating. Well, let's say this. It's hard to go back to making ramen in your college dorm room after having it at an actual, top-shelf ramen restaurant. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to downgrade yourself like that. So that was one reason it was important to me, if we're going to try and have some integrity to our review, to do them in an order. And the second was, since every 10th episode will be a roundup and look back at the previous games, only 1 game per series in each group of 9. That way it doesn't just become, hey, this is the Final Fantasy block and we're going to play 9 Final Fantasy games in a row. I want to keep it eclectic because I realize that people who listen to this podcast might not listen to every episode. Hopefully there are some of you who do just listen to every episode. And if you're one of those, great. I'm so happy to have you. But there are probably also people who only listen to episodes about games they care about or are curious about. And if you're one of those, great. I'm so excited to have you. Welcome aboard. So, if we just focused on Final Fantasy and it was somebody who didn't want to listen to Final Fantasy games, that person doesn't listen to a podcast for a year. That's no good. So, we try to mix it up, keep it eclectic. Early on, Russ and I sat down and we took turns. Okay, let's put this game. Okay, well, I'm going to do this one. Well, then let's do this one. And we put together a good chunk of the list that way. And then a couple weeks later, Russ wasn't around, and I don't know, I got overtaken by a wild fever or something. And I put in 100 more games on the list. By myself. And since then, I do the organizing, the planning, the editing, the posting of the podcast. Russ is important. This project wouldn't exist without Russ. And he is mostly just an entertainer on the podcast. That is most of his contribution. So I fiddle with the list sometimes. I shuffle things around and I move them, and I don't really check with Russ at this point. And then Chris is with us now too. I basically assign the games from the list now. I'm the school marm who says, here's your homework for next time. So that's the list. Right now the list it's about 260 games before it starts getting a little spotty. And we have up to this point only recorded 66 reviews, with not counting side quests. So we've got a long time before we get to the point in the list where I need to look for more games. And that's another thing. God, this is going to go on forever. I allot about a month per game for Home on the RNG, which has been working up until this point. I am concerned as we get closer to modern games where JRPGs are 100 hours each that the system may fall apart, because it is hard to find 100 free hours in a month when you've got a full-time job, other hobbies, friends, family, a house to maintain. I'm in my 40s, man. I don't have as much free time as I used to. So, yeah, that's my anxiety. That's my problem. Anyway, Russ and I do not live in the same city. Chris and I do. But Russ lives 3 hours away. So how it works is we play 3 games, which usually I allot 3 months for. And then we get together and we record 3 main episodes and usually 3 side quests. Now, the wrap-up videos don't require a month of prep time, so when it's time to do one of those, we just do it. And I do 1 less side quest, because I've learned that 6 episodes is as much as Chris and Russ can handle in a day before they start to get real grumpy. And I don't want my co-host to be grumpy. I want my co-host to be happy and to like this project and not burn out. So, 6 episodes in a recording session. We record them in a block, and then I edit them and I post them. The idea was to have 2 episodes a month. A main episode the first Monday of each month, and a side quest the third Monday of each month. That has not been the case for a little while, but that's because Russ and my mom had breast cancer, and Russ and I basically didn't see each other for a year because we were helping our mothers 3 hours apart. Luckily, we had a backlog of about a year's worth of videos, so you guys did not get to actually miss any content. But it ate our entire backlog, and we have slowly been building it back up, and we are just now at the point where I can go back to 2 episodes again. Although, I worry that I may have to go to 1 episode a month again as these games get longer and longer. So, that is how we pick the games. That is how we record the games. I will now talk about some of my editing process. Side quests are easy. I throw them into Adobe Audition. I use a hard limiter to boost the volume, but also cut the volume off so it doesn't peak. And I listen through the video and I try to cut out some, but not all of the ums and clicks and pops that the human mouth makes. I don't want to go so hardcore that I cut out every pause and every although I do try to edit out every, because I hate those sounds and I don't think you want to hear them either. Because if I edit out every and it's not going to sound as natural. So I do leave some in. But we are largely doing this off the cuff, and we are just people, right? We are just everyday average people. And so we sometimes hesitate and pause, as you can hear me doing here as I'm trying to gather my thoughts and put them in an order. So I try to clean that up a bit, just to make it easier to listen to, not to trick you into thinking we're superhumans who have perfect speech skills, because you're not stupid. I just want to make it better to listen to for you. So that's the main audio editing bit that I do. And for side quests, that's it. Very simple. For actual numbered episodes of Home on the RNG, it is a lot more work. And this is going to be a little weird, because I know I do this weird. Because I start in Adobe Premiere. Wow, I forgot. I've been editing all day, and I forgot the name of Premiere. Why do I use Adobe products? Well, I went to film school. And Adobe products are what they trained us on. That's what my experience is. I have hundreds of hours of video editing experience in Adobe Premiere, and less in Adobe Audition. Any video professional audio mixer has probably heard our episodes and cringed. I do the best I can. Audio is not my strong point, but I try. Video editing is my strong point, which is not as relevant to this series. But I start in Adobe Premiere because, as you know, if you listen to the episodes, as we switch from section to section, I put in audio from the game. And I have never figured out how in Adobe Audition to make it quick and easy like it is in Premiere. In Premiere, I just load the soundtrack of the game in, and I put it in a little bin, which is just a folder, and I can scroll down and look at names, and I can click on one, which puts it in a preview panel, and, let me listen to 5 seconds of this soundtrack. No, I don't like the way that one sounds. Let me listen to a couple seconds of the next one. It's very easy to just click around until I find the song that I want to use in that part of the review. I have not figured out a way to make it as easy in Adobe Audition. I'm sure a way exists, but it's just simpler for me if I don't know which file I'm going to pull a clip from to audit all of the clips in Premiere. Plus, I'm just so used to working in Premiere, it's easier for me. So how do I pick the audio tracks that we use from the game? I actually kind of have a method. It's not a rule. It's not a hard and fast rule. But generally what I aim to do, of course, the opening of the episode is the starting screen of the game is my goal. I may have screwed that up once or twice, but I try. It was very easy in the NES days when tracks were titled, opening, village theme, battle theme. But as you get further into the eras of gaming, they have to give them all names. And then you're just like, man, I hope this is the right thing. Let me listen to it. Yeah, that sounds right. So, opening theme for the opening of the episode. For personal history, I try to find like an overworld theme, a map theme. For story and characters, I generally try to pick a nice, calm town theme. Combat system is obvious. I try to use whatever the main or first battle theme is. Innovations, I tend to I try to find something odd, something different. Whatever I feel like the unique soundtrack in the whole game is. Whatever I think is the most different. It doesn't always work, but just something odd is what I aim for. For the music section, I try to pick whatever I think is musically most interesting, or if Chris names specific tracks that he really likes, I will try to pick that track to use for the music section. For final thoughts, I generally try to use the final boss theme. I don't always stick to that. And then, of course, after the episode, I try to do the closing credits theme for the game. That's how I make those picks. So I go through Premiere, and while I'm in... Adobe Premiere. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. As I go through Premiere, I'm also checking volume levels, trying to adjust to make sure that the music and the speaking are all roughly at the same level. I, of course, put an outro recorded by my friend Rachel. I need to do a new outro because I think we all do still use Twitter, but we're also on like Blue Sky and Mastodon, and I think those need to be promoted as well. And so I also edit out ums and ahs like I would have done there, except I've already been editing all day, so you're just going to get this raw because I am tired. And then I export the audio of that episode. Sometimes if there's a funny section or moment, I'll pull that out and I'll throw it on at the end as like a blooper. Then I export that as an MP3, bring it back into Adobe Audition so I can put it through my hard limiter again to make sure the levels are good for maximum listening. Again, audio editing is not my specialty, but I think the hard limiter does make it sound significantly better. And then I go back to playing the games again. In my personal life, I tend to alternate between home on the RNG and games I just want to play for fun. I try to do that at least because I don't want to risk burning out on anything. But sometimes if I'm running behind, because remember, I kind of allot myself a month per game, sometimes I may have to do a string of them. And we've got some longer games coming up here. I might have to play 2 at a time. I don't know. I'll figure something out. But that's kind of how home on the RNG works. The whole time we've got a group chat, and I text the guys, hey, what about this for a side quest? And hey, Chris, do you think you could talk about the music of this? And hey, Russ, is there a non-JRPG game you would like us to try and play and talk about? And then, of course, we have to schedule the recording sessions. I don't schedule a recording session until I'm ready. In a lot of these cases, Russ and Chris have played these games in the past, and I have never played them. That's not always the case, but it is often the case. So it is important that I play through these games in their entirety. It is important, but slightly less important that Chris and Russ play through them all in their entirety now if they had played them in the past. Because, they can still talk and contribute about a game if they've played it all the way through in the past. Yeah. So that's it. That's what I've got. That's just pulling back the curtain, letting you get a full view of the process behind the scenes. I could talk about audio equipment and everything, but I'm not educated enough to make that interesting. The mixer I use for the mics does have 4 inputs, and one of those inputs can be a phone call. I am hoping in the very near future to have a very special phone-in guest on an episode that we will use that for. And while we haven't done it, the idea has always been there that, me, Russ, and Chris, that's 3 out of 4 slots. There is a 4th slot open if we have a friend who wants to contribute on a particular game. I've always wanted to do that. We've almost done it once or twice. I would like it to happen because I have a lot of friends, as you've heard on side quests. I have friends who have a lot of things to say who I think are very entertaining and very interesting people. They're my friends. Of course I think that about them. That's it. That's what I've got for behind the scenes in the making of WTF Cinema. If you got any questions, or if you... I hear when people request that we do certain games, and I have been known to tweak the list and move a game up. So, if you've got one that you really, really want to hear, you could influence it. Although you should bear in mind, the review that you're hearing now was more than likely recorded a year before you hear it. So even if I bump your game to the top of the list, because ooh, they said such nice things, we're going to review their game next, and I shuffle the whole list around to move your game next in the queue, it'll still take a year for you to hear it. A year is kind of a ridiculous backlog, I thought, until we used it. And now it's my standard. So, that's it. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being a part of the Home on the RNG family. We will see you next time.